Hi guys, it's Kathy. Hope you're doing well. Let's get through her. Let's get through her. We are definitely at 1.25. So we can go. We can get going.
Now, Dr. Cotton, with respect to this particular film, 257C, what does this show?
This is an application of probe MS31, and you can see that there are bands in the samples, but as you can see, there are many small black dots all around the film. That is something that happens occasionally when you're adding the radioactive probe. If the probe is not washed off sufficiently, that is, you add the probe, you allow it to bind, you wash off excess probe before you lay your film over it. If the excess probe isn't washed off sufficiently, you will get what's generally referred to as background. And background doesn't always look like little dots, but it does sometimes. It does on this film. And although you can see bands in the known samples over here on the right, and you can see bands in item 12, there are bands that you can see also in item 78, but it totally obscures anything that might be seen in item 52. And because of the background, this at this time the membrane was the probe was washed off, and another hybridization, which is the term for adding the probe to the membrane, was attempted to see if we could get a better image.
Is there anything about the creation, for instance, of this film that somehow alters or changes the locations of the DNA that are found in the membrane itself?
There's nothing in the processing of the membrane in terms of adding probe, washing it off, removing the probe later on, that moves any of the DNA that's on the nylon. That DNA is chemically fixed to the nylon, and it's not going anywhere.
Is this something that's happened before in your laboratory, or is this the first time?
Oh, it's certainly not the first time. It happens occasionally. You certainly are unhappy when you get something like this, but with the number of membranes that are processed through the lab, you do see it every once in a while, and you usually hope that you can get another film off to correct the problems that you have with one that looks like this.
Is that simply to create or try to create another film that shows the same thing in terms of banding patterns, but doesn't have this background or noise that gets in the way of your being able to view it clearly?
That's right. You're simply going to repeat the process of adding that probe again and hoping that you get a better result.
Were any interpretations made from this particular film, 257C?
No, we certainly, when we did it again, we checked and made sure it was all consistent. But other than that, there's no interpretation that was done from this particular film.
Okay. Then if we could, Your Honor, I'd like to have marked as 257D, fourth auto red.
All right.
Showing you, Dr. Cotton, another film. Can you describe what that is that will be marked 257D?
This is the second try at getting a film off with this probe MS31.
All right. Could we then utilize that on the projection system so that you could tell us any conclusions or opinions that you made?
Sure.
This particular film seems to have fewer of those dots. Is that right?
Yes, this one came out just fine.
Now, with respect to this particular film, again, let me back up one step, if I may. Are each of these films that we've looked at that have shown these three evidence items, the Bundy stain, the boot stain, and the Foyer stain, all from the same membrane?
Yes.
So you simply do this one after another from the same membrane, is that right?
That's right.
Now, this is at what genetic marker again?
MS31.
And once this film was developed, did you examine it to determine if there were any opinions or conclusions that you could reach?
Yes, we did.
Now, specifically, again, are the markers the same in terms of the lambda and 1 kV markers that are present?
The markers are exactly the same, 2 on the left, 2 on the right, and 1 in the middle. And the DNA control samples marked TDS and K562 are in exactly the same positions as they have been on all of the other films that had these evidence samples on them.
Incidentally, as far as these markers are concerned, whether it's the, and let me actually ask one question before that. The samples at the top that have the labels with the boxes around them, what do those describe? Let me ask a different question. The lambda that has a box around it, is that a control?
Yes.
Okay.
You mean, are you talking about the label?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay, are the labels that have boxes around them, do they show anything different than the labels that have no boxes around them? Do you understand what I'm asking?
I do. And since you designed these labels, I know that you designed them so that anything that's a control sample has a little box around it. And the other samples that are evidence samples or samples from known people are just names or item numbers.
And actually the names or the evidence items are in larger print as well.
That's right.
Okay. As far as then these markers, and I'd like to direct your attention to, for instance, the TDS. Again, that's the banding pattern obtained from a member of your laboratory.
That's right.
Are you familiar from previous cases with what that laboratory member's DNA looks like?
Yes.
Are you accustomed to seeing it in certain locations for each of these various genetic markers?
Yes.
If you don't see them in an appropriate location, what action do you take?
Well, you would really try to figure out why they weren't in the right place. The only good example I can give you of them not being in the right place is that if we had an autorad that was hybridized, for example, with MS1, but was accidentally labeled MS31, you'd look at it and you'd say, this can't be MS31. These are the bands that should show up with MS1. It would tell you that there had been a labeling error or an error in addition of probe. So it helps to detect that. And then in addition, the actual band sizes when they're calculated later are compared to what we know to be the standard sizes for that sample.
Okay, turning your attention now, if I can, to what appears to be a black-like dot between the first TDS sample, which I believe is in the third lane from the left, and between that and the lane involving the Bundy stain.
Is this the dot you have in mind?
Yes. What is that?
It's a little bit of background, sort of like one left over from all the dots we had on before. It's not probably left over, it's probably a new dot, but it's some background from P32 that's stuck to the membrane that didn't come off in the wash.
P32, just what is that again?
That's the radioactive probe. That's the correct designation for the radioactive label that's on the DNA probe.
There also appear to be at least 2 or possibly 3 dots in the lower right-hand portion. You see what I'm referring to on the screen?
You're talking about here
Yes, and is there one?
and
Yes.
here?
What
yes.
are those items?
Still more background.
Do those interfere in your ability to be able to include types or banding patterns that are present on these autorads, these films?
No.
Why not?
Well, they're clearly not bands. They don't look anything like a band. And if you spend very much time in the lab looking at X-ray films, you become very good at distinguishing what's background from what's a band. The thing that they do interfere with is the computer imaging system that you may put your film on doesn't have the judgment that an experienced scientist would have. The computer imaging system is only looking for differences in darkness. So if this band, let's say this dot here, because it's bigger, happened to be moved over a little bit and be in a sample lane, then the computer imaging system would call that a band, even though it's clearly not. So in that case, you would have to tell the computer, nope, that's not a band, disregard it. But other than that, other than helping the computer to deal with the background, that's the only point at which you would say it interferes in the analysis in any way.
Okay, now specifically referring to what we've been discussing, that is the Bundy stain and the Rockingham-Foyer stains. Do you see banding patterns for those 2 items of evidence?
Yes, I do.
All right, if you could, again, using the pointer, perhaps place arrows at the locations of bands in the lanes of those 2 items.
Let me undo that one.
First of all, do those 2 items appear to have DNA with banding patterns that appear to be the same as one another?
Yes.
Are there any individuals on this particular film, that is amongst the known people, who first of all can be excluded? In other words, could not have donated the DNA found in the Bundy stain and the Foyer stain?
Yes.
Who?
Nicole Brown would be excluded. Her bands are in a different position than the ones in item 52 or item 12. And Mr. Goldman has a single band for this probe. It happens to be in a similar position to one of the bands of Nicole Brown. But in any case, it is not in a similar position to either of the two bands from the Bundy scene or from item number 12.
All right. What about the third remaining known sample, that of Mr. Simpson? Can he be excluded as a donor of the DNA in those two stains?
No, he cannot.
Why?
Mr. Simpson has two bands, which are certainly visually in a position the same as those in item 12 and item 52.
All right. Could you place the two arrows in those same two bands locations with respect to Mr. Simpson's DNA? All right, Your Honor, may we have that printed as well?
Yes. That'll be 257D1.
All right, Dr. Cotton, did you conduct any other probings with another genetic marker of this particular set of samples from the same membrane?
Yes,
What genetic marker would that be at? Which should we discuss next?
MS43.
Your Honor, may this particular film be again substituted for the previously marked 257E?
Yes. And Dr. Cotton, which marker was this?
MS43.
Dr. Cotton, could you clear the screen of those arrows and we'll move to the next film?
Give him a 5%. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we need to take a comfort break real quick here. And let me just add, this is going to be a long trial, as you know. Anytime any of you need to take a comfort break, just let the bailiffs know. All right, we can accommodate that. All right, we'll take a 5-minute comfort break.
Are we going to get into,
All right, she can remain down at the podium.
so like, I know this is a lot of TV. I understand TV trials are not like regular trials. I get that, and that's stupid. But even in regular trials, we have like this timeline. And the prosecution shows what the murderer did right before, yes, 1.25. Right before the timeline as it happens, then what he did afterwards. So I know that they talked about the dog and what time the dog was barking. I think they brought, I know Cato talked about the time of the bang. Good morning. But are they going to give us a time? Are they going to tell us how this murder happened? Are they ever going to get into, are they ever really going to tell us? No freaking wonder he was acquitted. Like, they haven't told us yet that O.J. Simpson killed these two people and how he did. And we are in May. We started this trial, I think, in January, right? And we are in May. And that nobody is saying that O.J. Simpson, nobody has said once O.J. Simpson stabbed these two people. It wasn't even said in passing. It wasn't even thought of. Nobody has said in this murder trial, that two people were murdered. Nobody has said that two people are murdered or how they were murdered or why they were murdered. I mean, are they really, are we going to hear something about murder sometime soon? DNA is important. DNA should have been 2 days, maybe 1 day. You know what I mean? The DNA is either there or not there. That.
All right, let the record reflect we've all been rejoined by our comfortable jurors, and let's resume.
Dr. Cotton, and if we could proceed with the next genetic marker, and I believe you said that was MS43.
That's what I was going to say. Is it on YouTube?
It should be People's Exhibit 257E. Now, again, is this simply another film from the same membrane that contains the various items that are labeled at the top?
That's right.
Now, as far as this particular film is concerned, and again, just quickly, as far as TDS, your known laboratory member, are his or her bands in the appropriate location from your past experience?
Yes, it's his, and they are.
Now, with regard to, again, the Bundy stain number 52.
The defense should distract. They should distract. That's the defense's job. This is the freaking prosecution we're on. All these months that we have been spending watching this trial is all the prosecution so far.
And the foyer stain number 12. Can you use the arrows and describe their relative locations?
I certainly can for 12. There's two bands right here and right here. Did you want me to mark them?
Yes.
I bet you they talked about the murder. I bet you.
And I'm going to stop you. We'll break this one down a little bit.
Okay.
As far as those particular bands, are there any individuals, that is either Mr. Simpson, Nicole Brown, or Ron Goldman, that can be excluded? In other words, can be eliminated as being donors of those two stains from the foyer and the walkway, Bundy walkway?
Yes.
Okay. Who are those individual or individuals?
Nicole Brown is excluded. Her bands are not in the same position. And Ronald Goldman is excluded. His bands are not in the same position.
Incidentally, just to make it clear, to exclude someone, do you need to be able to exclude them at each of these different genetic markers?
So did you just sit there and tell me that the blood inside OJ's house was his own? Because that doesn't prove nothing. I have cats. He has a dog. I'm sure there's his blood all over his house. That doesn't mean anything.
Yes.
As far
Maybe I'm
as
just cranky
Mr.
this
Simpson,
morning.
Is he excluded, or could he be a donor of the DNA in those two evidence stains?
He is not excluded, so he could be a donor.
Okay. I'll have you place the arrows on his banding patterns at this time.
Please tell me I got the address wrong and this is really blood at
Now,
the
let's
scene.
turn to the Bundy stain, item number 52. First of all, on this projection screen, can you see any banding patterns from the sample at this genetic marker?
I sort of see where they are, but you have to keep in mind that I've looked at the original many times.
All right.
So if I were looking at this and on the screen and hadn't seen it before, I doubt that I could pick out anything.
Would it help you to look at the original?
I'm a
light box up
freaking
close?
joy.
I did look at it.
I'm a
before we
joy.
walked up there,
Pleasure to
and,
be around.
On the light box, you can see two very faint bands. They are hard to pick out, and they are consistent with the bands in number 12, and they are consistent with the bands in Mr. Simpson.
Now, with regard to these very faint bands as you've described them, how do you know those are banding patterns from DNA in that sample? How do you reach that conclusion when they're faint bands like that?
Let me talk about this sample rather than try to make it a generality.
All right.
The best banding pattern we have from item 52 is that in the cocktail. And that was the first time that probes were added to the membrane, and it's typical that that's where you get your strongest signal or your darkest bands.
Let me stop you for just a moment. The cocktail is that first film that has several bands for each of the samples?
That's right.
Instead of just one or two?
Instead of just one or two.
All right, go ahead.
The individual probes are used to both confirm the data in that cocktail and to identify which band in the cocktail was produced by which marker. So if the cocktail has in it probe MS1, MS31, MS43, and the last one that we haven't looked at in the cocktail, G3, then when you go back and use them one at a time, of the multiple bands in the cocktail, you can pick out which two were created by probe MS1, which, or one or two, which ones were created by MS31, and so on. Even if you go back and do each probe individually, as long as you get 3 out of the 4 and compare them back to the cocktail, you can deduce what the last 2 came from. So even if we were to see nothing on MS43, we still have therefore identified the MS43 bands on that cocktail. So the fact that these are very light, it would be nicer if they were not, but even if we didn't see them at all, there is a sufficient amount of data to go forward.
Incidentally, when these films are reviewed, are you the only person that looks at these films to reach conclusions or opinions?
Absolutely not.
Who else looks at them?
At a very minimum, the analyst who's done the work will review the films before I ever see them. In a case where there are light bands, it's very usual in the lab to then have 1 or 2 other people also look at the films to get their opinion as well, in terms of, are these bands sufficiently distinct that we can use them in the analysis.
What would then be, and perhaps we could have this printed, Your Honor, and marked as,
This would be 257E1.
thank you. I believe you mentioned, and again, before we leave this auto read completely, Dr. Cotton, there again appear to be some of these spots in various locations. Is that right?
Yes,
What are those?
those are the same type of spots that we talked about earlier. They're background from the P32 label, and they certainly aren't going. The spots here don't look like bands, and they aren't going to interfere.
All right. I believe you mentioned the next genetic marker was G3. Is that right?
That's right.
Your Honor, again, may we have the original for that marker substituted for what's already been marked as 257F?
Yes.
Dr. Cotton, showing you what will be marked 257F. Is that the next genetic marker in the series of tests performed on these three evidence samples?
Yes.
And if you could, Dr. Cotton, you're doing exactly what I was going to ask. Thank you. Now, showing you this particular film, and you've already described it as being at a, would this be a fourth genetic marker, G3?
Yes.
And would this be the fourth of the four markers that are part of what you referred to as that cocktail earlier?
Yes.
Now, in this sample again, and referring to the markers, including the sample for TDS, did the markers, or do they appear as though they perform properly?
Yes, they all look fine.
Actually, I'm not sure markers perform, but
Well,
do they show that the test was performed properly?
markers look just like they should, and there's no indication from them that there was any problem with the gel or the addition of probe.
Now, referring you to, again, the evidence items, the Bundy stain and the Foyer stain, were banding patterns produced at this particular marker?
Yes.
And could you use the arrow to point out their locations?
There are two bands in item 52. One is here, and the other one, which is also difficult to see on this screen, but is visible clearly on the film, is right here. Item number 12 from the Foyer has two bands, and I'm indicating those with the arrows.
Now, what about the samples from Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman? Could they have been donors of the DNA found in those two stains?
No, they could not.
Why?
Each of those patterns has two bands,
You're referring to Mr. Goldman right
Mr. Goldman and now Nicole Brown, and their bands are not in the same position. They're not consistent with the bands from item 52 or from the Foyer.
Now, if I could take you down to the very bottom of Mr. Goldman's banding patterns, is that a band at the very bottom there?
I need to look at the original to.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Now, why couldn't Mr. Goldman be a donor, for instance, in referring to that bottom band there that you just looked at?
Do you want me to replace the arrows? Mr. Goldman has a band that's quite small, and it almost lines up exactly with the very smallest band in the marker. When I say the band is small, what I really mean is the DNA fragment that made that band is not very long. I don't mean that the physical size of the band that you see there is small. That is, it's light, but it's about the same dimensions as all the other bands. The band in the item 12 and item 52 that's also towards the bottom of the gel does not line up with this lower marker, and you can see is some distance above it. So, and then Mr. Goldman's other band, which is up here, does not line up with the upper band in the evidence samples. So he's clearly excluded from being a possible donor of the DNA in item 52 and item 12.
What about Mr. Simpson?
Mr. Simpson has two bands. They are in similar positions to the bands in item 52 and item 12.
And could you place the arrows at the locations of his banding patterns? Now, Dr. Cotton, with regard to this process of more than one person reading these particular films as to banding patterns, did that happen in this case?
I remember specifically that we had several people look at the bands in item 52.
Why as to that particular item?
Because that item doesn't have much DNA in it. The banding pattern is light, and I wanted, and Julie Cooper wanted, who she was still at Cellmark at that time. The original report was generated, and later on, Paula, who wanted to make sure that we all had come to the same conclusion.
Our objection is to what Julie Cooper said.
Sustained. Answer stricken, jury to disregard indication what Julie Cooper said.
With regard to the results in this case as to 52, the Bundy stain, was there agreement about the results?
Objection.
Sustained. Hearsay.
As far as the records that you keep in this case, Dr. Cotton, first of all, I believe you described the fact that records are kept in the course of your testing.
Yes,
And do those records reflect testing conducted by the analysts in this case?
yes,
Do those records include analyst determination about samples that match or samples in which persons are excluded?
yes,
With respect to item 52, do those documents reflect determinations of either exclusions or inclusions?
they do.
And with respect to those records, do they show the opinions of other analysts in this case?
Yes, the opinions are reflected in the signatures that are on the report. So if someone signed the report, indicates that they agree with the conclusions that are written in the report.
And do those reports include the determination or a determination with respect to, for example, the Bundy stain item number 52, that matched any particular individual?
Objection, Your Honor. Distinguishing between opinions and other types of statements in business records.
Sustained.
Dr. Cotton, in forming your conclusions in this case, do you consider the opinions of other experts in your laboratory?
Yes, I do.
Did that take place in this case?
Yes, it did.
Did that take place with respect to all of the conclusions about matching patterns, that is, individuals who may match a sample versus individuals who may be excluded as the donor of a sample?
Yes,
Just 5 more months away.
And with respect to item 52, did those opinions conclude the same as you did?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained. Certainly.
Forming your own individual conclusions about this case, did you rely on or take into consideration the opinions of, for instance, Julie Cooper and Paula Yates?
yes,
With respect to those particular opinions that you relied on, well, let me rephrase that. In reliance upon those opinions, did that lead to the formation of your own opinions in any
Hi,
way?
Kelly Love.
in my role in reviewing the case, I received the
Hey, Carla.
data and a draft report. The draft report indicates the opinion of the analyst who did the case. I have the option to agree or disagree with it or change the report. And at the end of this process of drafting the report, we have to agree on the conclusions so that we can both sign it.
I would object to the last portion of the answer and ask to be stricken.
Oral.
Now, with respect to those opinions, first of all, as far as these draft opinions, did you change them in terms of their conclusions from when they were drafted by one of the analysts?
Objection is the hearsay of the other analysts.
Oral.
I don't have exact recollection of whether I made any changes in the report. I know that I did not change the substance of the report, whether I made any grammatical changes or wording changes, to be more precise, I can't remember.
Did you make any changes in terms of conclusions about patterns or evidence items that matched known individuals?
No, I did not.
All right, then, Your Honor, if we could print this particular
Yes.
genetic marker film to
257 F1.
proceed to the last one.
This here is John Deere country.
All right, with respect to these individual markers, You described the fact, Dr. Cotton, that this cocktail contains a combination of 4 markers, correct?
That's right.
And you have now described the individual films for each of those 4 markers.
That's right.
Do you stop at 4 markers, or do you use generally any more than that?
We have a 5th marker that we usually try to use and was used in this case.
And what's the name of that marker?
The marker is designated YNH24.
All right, Your Honor, I have one more original X-ray film that I'd ask to be substituted for the already marked copy, which is 257G.
Yes.
Showing you, Dr. Cotton, what will be Exhibit 257G. Can you just tell us what that is?
This is the X-ray film that was produced using the probe YNH24.
And if you
Let's clear the telescope.
could clear the arrows. Thank you. Now again, is your testing or your typing process at this genetic marker, I believe you said was YNH24, taken from, again, the same membrane that each of the previous markers were tested from?
Yes.
As far as the controls, and without going into that in depth, do they appear appropriate as they should?
Yes, they do.
Now, referring to the evidence item, and if you can, again, focus on the Bundy stain number 52 and the stain from the Rockingham foyer, number 12. Let's start with number 12. Do you see banding patterns in that sample at this genetic marker?
Yes.
And if you would, please use the arrows again to describe those locations.
There you are.
Now, with regard to the Bundy stain, are there banding patterns in any locations in that particular lane?
Yes, there are.
All right. Could you describe where those are, please?
There's, again, these bands are faint. They are here and here.
Did you have an opportunity just a few moments ago to look at the original film on the light box that you have in front of you?
Yes, I did.
And
And
by looking at it on that light box, were you able to see the 2 bands in the Bundy stain lane on this film?
yes, I can. Or I did.
Now, as far as Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman, are they possible donors for the DNA in those stains or not?
They are not.
Okay, if you could just show with respect to each one why that's the case.
Nicole Brown has 2 bands that are close together, and they're clearly in a different location than the 2 bands in the item
Hedwig.
12 and
Hi,
from the 2
Hedwig.
bands in item 52. Ronald Goldman has 2 bands also, one right here, the second one down here. The upper one is relatively close in position to the upper bands in item 52 and item 12, but not in exactly the same position. And Mr. Goldman's lower band is in a position where there is no band at all in item 12 or item 52. So he's clearly excluded, as is Nicole Brown.
Now, with regard to Mr. Simpson, what can you say about him in terms of being excluded or included as a possible donor of the DNA in those 2 stains?
He is included.
All right, why is that?
Mr. Simpson also has 2 bands, one here and another one here. And they are certainly in visually similar positions to the bands in item 52 and item 12.
All right, Your Honor, may the copy be printed of this auto read with the arrows.
57G1. Fair enough.
Dr. Cotton, with regard to, and let's start with item number 52, the Bundy stain. Is Mr. Simpson included or excluded as a donor of the DNA in that sample following your review of all of the x-rays regarding that particular sample?
I would object as to the Bundy stain, and I would ask for just an instruction from the court.
You've made the objection. It's noted. Proceed.
Mr. Simpson is included as a possible donor to that item.
How do you base that opinion? Is there a short way you can describe that from what you've just reviewed with the jury?
When you review the DNA bands from, we're on 52, right?
Yes.
Yes.
the Bundy stain.
When you review, excuse me, when you review the DNA bands that are visible in the cocktail and in each individual film for that item, in each case they are consistent with the bands that are seen in Mr. Simpson's pattern.
And at how many different genetic markers is that the case?
Altogether, there are 5 genetic markers.
With respect to those 5 markers, is there a term you use when an individual cannot be excluded as a donor at a particular genetic marker using this RFLP process?
The term that you may be referring to is match, and that term implies that not only are the bands visually similar, but when analyzed on the computer imaging system and a DNA fragment size is calculated, that those sizes are also close enough together to confirm your visual interpretation that the patterns are very similar. So in fact, when you go through that exercise, the bands in item 52 match the bands in Mr. Simpson.
As far as looking at these patterns from these various films with your eye, did Mr. Simpson match item number 52, the Bundy stain?
Yes.
As far as this imaging process or the use of the computer that you described, did he match at these 5 genetic marker locations the DNA found in the Bundy stain?
Yes.
Now, turning your attention to the Foyer stain from the Rockingham Foyer, item number 12. Following your review of the material that you've just described in court, what statement, if any, can you make about Mr. Simpson and that particular stain?
The DNA banding pattern from item number 12 in the Foyer matches the DNA banding pattern from Mr. Simpson.
With respect to this computer, this imaging device, what conclusions were reached with regard to that stain in Mr. Simpson?
Well, actually, what I just said was a compilation of both the visual assessment and the computer imaging data, and the two patterns do match.
As far as the possibility that Ronald Goldman or Nicole Brown contributed either of those stains, what can you say?
They definitely did not.
Okay, Dr. Cotton, with regard to these films that you just described, there was a third evidence item on each of them, wasn't there?
Yes,
And that was the boot stain for Mr. Goldman's shoe, number 78.
that's right.
All right. I'd like to, if you would, return to the podium and perhaps in a little shorter order with fewer questions, have you demonstrate the results of the testing of item number 78, the boot stain. Could you do that?
Sure.
They had to have swabbed the glove. They had to have, right?
Initially to 257A, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Clark, Mr. Neufeld, just for your information, I'm going to change court reporters at 2:30.
Very well.
Change court reporters at 2:30. You going to go the whole thing? Okay. What if I want to change?
Coach, don't take me out, coach. Frankincense today.
will be a
It
break.
smells so good.
Initially, Your Honor, I would ask permission to show Exhibit 99. That's a photograph of the bottom of the boot.
All right. Let's clear the telestrator.
All right, we can then move to Exhibit 257A.
Yes, Nan. I love it.
Ron, sorry, can you do a very brief sidebar on this particular issue before we go forward?
All right, with court reporter.
Thank you.
Potpourri, candles, air fresheners, really nothing like changes the smell in a room like incense does. It just works way better.
Dr. Cotton, can I ask you to come back down? Now, first of all, Dr. Cotton, are these the same films that you've just looked at and testified about with regard to the Bundy stain as well as the Foyer stain?
Yes.
Now, what I'd like to do is focus your attention in particular on what's labeled item number 78, the stain for Mr. Goldman's boot.
Yes.
First of all, is this what you referred to earlier as the cocktail film or cocktail X-ray?
Yes, it is.
All right, this is 257A, correct?
Yes. As far as banding patterns that are present for the boot, can you tell us about them? What do you see?
There are quite a few bands in this pattern, and I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
When you see 11 bands, as you've just counted them, does that have any particular meaning to you as a DNA analyst?
Yes.
What?
If we have two bands, this is 4 probes went into this cocktail. If we have 2 bands with each probe, if we only had one person, the maximum number of bands we could have would be 8. The fact that we have 11 bands here means that we have more than one person here. And it generally, I would conclude that we have 2. I certainly wouldn't conclude that we have 3.
With regard to these bands, are there any other opinions you can offer, not just from the number of bands, but from also what appears to be differences in how dark the bands are?
The bands that are the first 8, these ones at the top, are all very easy to see. They're pretty intense. They're not all identical, but they're pretty intense. The 3 lower bands, this one, and this one, are much lighter. And from that, I would make a preliminary conclusion that I had one person there who had where there was a fair amount of DNA from that person, and a second person who is only represented or who is represented by a much smaller amount of DNA.
Is the darkness of the bands themselves some indication of the relative amounts of DNA present?
As I've said earlier, that's the most useful and easiest way to think about bands being darker and lighter. There are a lot of technical things that can go into bands being darker and lighter, but of all the reasons why a band would be darker or lighter than another, the primary one is going to be how much DNA is present. And there will be a whole series of secondary things that can affect the intensity as well.
Following your review of the banding patterns for the boot stain, did you reach any preliminary or other conclusions about which, if any, of the 3 persons, Mr. Simpson, Nicole Brown, or Ron Goldman, that could or could not have been donors of the DNA from that boot stain?
Yes, we did.
All right, can you describe those, please?
The initial conclusions that we made using just this film alone was that there was a DNA banding pattern, and that is the top 8 bands. That is consistent with the DNA banding pattern from Nicole Brown. And I know this is dark on the screen here, but she also has 8 bands in similar positions.
All right, if you could, would you mark those locations but use a different colored arrow? Now, with regard to the 3 bands that are lighter in intensity, and I'm referring to, again, the lane with the boot stain on it, and they are the 3 arrows in pink, are there any other individuals on this particular film that can either be excluded or included as possible donors of those bands?
Mr. Simpson does not have, he has a band down here that may be in about the same position as this one. He has no band in the vicinity where this last band, that is the lowest one in item 78, is. So he doesn't seem to be a possible donor to the DNA in item 78. Mr. Goldman has 3 bands in his pattern, and that's not his whole pattern, but the 3 lower bands in his pattern seem to be consistent with these 3 light bands. And I wouldn't want to make any further conclusion about those 3 light bands other than they're consistent with him, but that's about all you can say.
What about all of those bands in Mr. Goldman's sample that are above the 3 that you have marked, where the 3 pink arrows are?
Based on this film, we can't tell if any of those other bands, let me rephrase that. Based on this film, we can't tell whether or not there are any additional bands in item 78 that may or may not be consistent with Mr. Goldman's known sample.
Turning your attention to what appears to be the lower or bottommost band on Mr. Goldman near the bottom of the film.
Yes,
Do you see that?
I do. You're talking about this one
Yes.
right here.
Yes. Is there any band in that location in the evidence sample itself, the boot stain?
I don't recall that there is, but I'd like to look at the original to give you an answer.
All right. I was just going to say that. Before we do that, could we have this particular?
All right, let's move the exemplar arrow off the diagram, though, off the auto red.
The
The current arrow, the live arrow, let's pull it off the diagram.
this one.
Yeah, pull it off. Okay. So there's no confusion.
And Your Honor, could this be?
This would be 257A2.
Very good.
All right, Mr. Farrell, do we have that captured?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Dr. Cotton, showing you the original film, could you look at the light box and see if there are any band in the location on the boot stain in a similar location to Mr. Goldman's lowermost band?
I don't see one that I would be happy interpreting. I don't think there is.
Now, does the fact that there's no band that you would be able to interpret from this particular
Let's,
film?
you want to clear the arrows on this?
You know, I have plenty of space in lower shelves. I have plenty of space in lower shelves, but one day Anthony was like, I'm going to redo the kitchen. I don't like how it is. Now, mind you, he never, ever cooks, ever cooks. So I had things where I could just, without even thinking about it, my hand would just grab what I needed from where I needed it, mostly at this level. Okay. What I needed was at this level. And he's like, I can get more space. So the way he started was he took things and he put them way on the top shelves, way at the back. I get it. In his mind, he was like, I'm going to maximize the space we have in this kitchen. I'm going to maximize it. So we're going to start way at the back. It's been months and I struggle every single day. I struggle. But I would cut my arm off before I said anything. I would cut your arms off before I said anything, because do you know how many times Anthony has ever cleaned the kitchen before that day? Zero. So do it wrong. I don't care. Do it way wrong. I will struggle. I will figure it out as long as you do it. That's why yesterday was so crazy when he knocks on my door at 2:30 p.m. Okay, Mom, it's time to clean. Wait, what? It's time to clean? You're going to clean? And never. His father was like that. His father would clean like once every 60 to 90 days. He would deep clean everything. All right? Well, for like 2 weeks after that he did that, he would say how he has to do everything around the house. He has to do everything. Look at that. Look at how clean that is. I did that. I have to do everything around the house. But the problem is, the 2 weeks after, there was mess every day that builds up, and that would be me. I did what I could. I was a busy mom. I did what I could, which usually meant doing the most important things. Like making sure that all right, the fly lady, if you guys know who the fly lady is. A long time ago, I started reading the fly lady stuff, so my sink is always clean before I go to bed. My kitchen sink is always clean before I go to bed. It's just one tiny thing that happens. So when I wake up, I have a clean sink. It's stupid, I know, but listen, if you guys can only do one thing a day, make sure your kitchen sink is clean before you go to bed. Just try that one stupid thing. It'll change everything. But sometimes that's all I had time to do. Sometimes that was it. Like the floor is covered in toys, and there's clothing in the hallway and in the bathroom and hanging from the ceiling fan, and I cleaned the kitchen sink. That's what I did. So like I would scrape the top layer of dirt is how I would call it. Like just the most important things I would do every day. I had to, every day I had to do that. He would clean once every 60 to 90 days and be like, oh, yeah. He did a great job when he did it. Everything looked beautiful. It took him hours and hours to do. He didn't take care of the kids while he was cleaning. He didn't go get groceries while he was cleaning. He didn't cook while he was cleaning. He was just like, I'm going to clean today. And that's it. He cleaned. And he didn't have any other distractions, of course. And then he would walk around. And that's what my son does every once in a while. He'd be like, all right, let's clean. We're going to clean, which is awesome. I would never complain. But I kept saying to him, like, I did the kitchen. He was in the dining room, right? And I'm like, see, Anthony, look, I cleaned this half of the counter yesterday. So now I only have this half to clean today. I'm like, imagine what I would have to do out here today if two people, if I cleaned this half and someone else would have cleaned that half. It only take a second to clean that half. And I kept doing things like that. I'm like, yep, look, I scrubbed that yesterday, but that needs scrubbed. Imagine if someone else would have just taken 5 minutes to scrub that. I am no. If my next husband thinks I'm going to be cleaning the house, he can ask my D, because no, I won't. I absolutely won't clean up after him. Not one thing. Absolutely not. I spent too many years doing that. No. I won't make a lovely wife someday. I won't. If I'm a wife, then the husband comes with a maid and a cook, because I will be damned if I'm going to do it. I won't do it. I just won't. It would take, I don't know what it would take to have me do his laundry, cook his meals. Even though my food tastes really good, so maybe I might do that. Wash his dishes. That ain't happening. It's not. He would have to come with his own maid. Yeah.
And again, if you could point out, Dr. Cotton, just the location that we're talking about.
Can you move it up a little? There we go. All right. You were asking me if there's anything equivalent to this band in Mr. Goldman over here in item 78. I don't see anything, even when I look at the original film, that's clearly distinguishable in that area as a band.
As a result of simply this film from this cocktail, are you able to exclude or include Mr. Goldman as a donor of some of the DNA in that boot stain?
I really wouldn't want to make any conclusion based on this film alone.
Why not?
It's not enough information.
And when you say not enough information, what do you mean?
What I mean is there are 3 additional bands in item 78. They appear to be consistent with 3 of the bands in Mr. Goldman's pattern, but apart from that statement, it doesn't mean that it is his. From this film, you can't say that they match his in terms of his whole pattern. You can't say that Mr. Goldman is definitely a contributor to item 78. On the other hand, you can't say he's definitely not a contributor to item 78. So basically, from this film, you are making an inconclusive statement. I don't know is the bottom line regarding Mr. Goldman.
And would you want further information if you're able to obtain further information to make such a conclusion?
Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to take a brief recess at this time. Please remember all my admonitions to you, and we'll stand in recess for 15 minutes.
Dr. Cotton. So I started trying Carlos, trying to use AI to help me do that, but it's just so freaking hard. I have all these crazy court cases that are just audio or just the transcript. Oh man. I need a team. I need someone to help me build those out,
And
but
Mr.
I can't
Clark, where
do
would
it.
you like Dr. Cotton?
I'm sorry?
Where would you like Dr. Cotton, at the podium or at the...
I think the podium is the next order or the same order of business.
All right, Dr. Cotton. Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Cotton, I'm going to ask you to take one more look at the first single genetic marker film that involved probe MS1 that's already been marked as People's Exhibit 257C as a boy.
357B.
Yes.
357B is MS1.
Is that right, Dr. Cotton? Is this the single genetic marker film MS1?
Yes.
Okay. Directing your attention again at this point just to the boot sting, item number 78. Did this genetic marker produce any banding results?
Yes, it did.
All right. Could you use the arrow and show us where they are?
There's a band right here. Second one here. A third one here. There is a fourth one on the film, and I can't distinguish where it is on the screen. Now, on the film, I know from reviewing all of the data that it's consistent with the lower band in Mr. Goldman's pattern, but I don't really want to try to put an arrow to it on the screen because frankly, I can't see it on the screen.
Okay, let's break that up a little bit. When you say that there is a fourth band there, how do you know that?
Well, I just refreshed my recollection by looking at the film before they put it on the Elmo. And I know from reviewing the data in the case folder that this pattern on this film was analyzed separately on the computer imaging system as well. And not only, I mean, I see a band there, as did the other person who did the work, but
Sustained. That part's stripping.
the computer imaging system also picks out 4 bands in this pattern.
Now, let me ask you about that a little bit. When the computer imaging system picks out a band, but apparently that band was what? Would you call it faint, very weak, or what?
It's faint. It's sort of odd because the other faint bands, I mean, for example, the faint band in item 52, even on the screen, I can pretty much pick out where it is. However, I can't do that on the screen for the fourth band in item 78, although it's not difficult to see on the film.
And you're referring to what is not difficult to see on the film?
The fourth band in item 78 that I have not tried to put an arrow to on the screen.
All right. Now, just referring to the 3 arrows that you placed under the boot stain number 78, can you make any statements about possible contributors of DNA from the 3 known samples from Mr. Simpson, Nicole Brown, and Ron Goldman?
Yes.
All right. Would you describe that, please?
Well, from this film alone, you couldn't exclude either any of the 3.
Now, by any of the 3, you're referring to Mr. Simpson, Nicole Brown, or Ron Goldman?
Yes.
Now, that opinion or that statement that you can't exclude anyone, is that limited to just the information on this single genetic marker alone?
That's limited. If you only had this as your information and you didn't have any other information, that's the conclusion I would come to based on this film by itself.
By looking at all of the films that relate to this particular evidence item, is Mr. Simpson included or excluded?
Based on all the films for this evidence item, he's excluded.
So he's not a potential donor of the DNA that you were able to determine from the boot stain.
That's right. Based on all of the data, he is not.
Okay, turning then to the other 2 potential donors based on this test or this single genetic marker, in particular Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman, can you describe for us what it is about them that makes them potential donors?
The top band in item 78 and the lower band in item 78 that we can see here on the screen are consistent with the 2 bands in Nicole Brown. Let's see. Whoops. The middle band of the 3 that we can see on the screen is consistent with the upper band in Ronald Goldman. The band that I can't easily identify for you on the screen is in this vicinity down here, and based on all of the sizing data is consistent with this lower band, but I can't demonstrate it to you on the screen.
Based on the results that you were able to determine from this single genetic marker film, as well as the cocktail that was immediately shown before this one, are there any conclusions just up to the point of your having looked at these 2 films about donors to the boot stain number 78?
The conclusions based on the 2 would be essentially similar to the conclusions based on the 1. Nicole Brown is consistent with being a donor, and it's inconclusive at this point whether or not Ronald Goldman is a donor.
What do you mean inconclusive?
There's still not enough information to exclude him, and there's not really a sufficient amount of information to include him as a donor.
Is this a situation in which,
Yes.
all right, if we could then print this particular
Yes, let's take the live arrow and take it off the diagram.
Dr. Cotton, can that one take the one arrow?
Oh, I'm
that's still
sorry.
Alive, so to speak, and just move it up to the top.
So we don't confuse anything when we print this out.
All right, guys, be right back. Be right
Referring,
back.
if I could, Dr. Cotton, now to what's been previously marked Exhibit 257C. Is that the same film that you described earlier involving the probe or the genetic marker MS31?
Yes.
That item we just printed, Your Honor, would that be 257?
B2.
Now, referring you, Dr. Cotton, to this second single genetic marker, MS31. Were banding patterns developed on, again, the boot stain?
Yes.
And could you use the arrows to describe their location?
There are 2 bands using this probe, MS31, from the boot stain, and I'm marking them with the arrows. And there are no additional bands in that lane that are visible, just these 2.
First of all, with respect to Mr. Simpson, from this film alone, can you exclude him as a possible donor of either of the bands that appear in the lane involving the boot?
Yes, you can definitely exclude him.
Does that mean then he is excluded in total from having donated any DNA on the boot stain?
Yes.
Now, what about the remaining 2 individuals, Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman?
Well, neither of them are excluded. Nicole Brown has 2 bands that are, I'm going to, wait a minute. I have to do this. She has 2 bands, and they are in a similar position to the 2 bands that you see from item 78. Ronald Goldman has a single band with this probe. It is in virtually the same position as the single band, or the lower band in Nicole Brown's pattern. There is a band here in this position, but if there's any contribution in item 78 from a band that's consistent with Mr. Goldman, you couldn't tell because it overlaps with the 2 bands that are consistent with Nicole Brown. So this doesn't provide you any additional information as to whether there's anything else in 78 that's consistent with Mr. Goldman. You just couldn't tell from this information.
All right, first of all, that one arrow that's pointed to the right, unlike the direction of the other 3 arrows, did you use that direction simply so that you wouldn't overlap the arrow over the band in Mr. Goldman's lane?
That's right.
So there's no meaning to the direction of the arrow, it's just a matter of
No,
convenience.
that's right. It would have just covered up the band that I was about to talk about.
Now, following the cocktail X-ray film, and then these now 2 individual genetic markers, as far as your preliminary conclusion as to Nicole Brown being a potential donor of the DNA on the boot stain, is that still true after this second marker?
Yes, it is.
Is it also still true that with respect to Mr. Goldman, the results are inconclusive?
That's right.
In other words, he may or may not have been a donor or possible donor of that DNA.
That's right.
All right, did you then turn to, again, a third genetic marker done alone and by itself?
Yes.
Would that be MS43 or what was previously marked People's Exhibit 257E?
Yes.
E.
And could we print the image currently with the arrows? Which would be 257C2. I'm sorry, 257D. The previous film was 257D that was shown.
All right. All right, do we have that cap? All right,
Did you have a chance, Dr. Cotton, did you have a chance to look at the MS43
Yes.
film? Showing you now the MS43 genetic marker film. First of all, is there information or banding patterns provided by the boot stain number 78?
Yes.
And could you again use the arrows to indicate what banding patterns exist?
It's 2 bands still in item 78, and I'm marking them with the arrows, and they are similar in position to the 2 bands from Nicole Brown.
Now, first of all, as far as Mr. Simpson is concerned, is he excluded at this marker as well as a donor of DNA from the boot stain?
Yes, he is.
Turning to Nicole Brown, you've just indicated with 2 arrows bands that are in the same relative position as those for the boot stain.
Yes.
What about Mr. Goldman?
They're,
I'm sorry, did one of your arrows on Nicole Brown cover one of Mr. Goldman's bands?
yes, do you want me to make it be the other way?
If you could, just switch the direction like you did previously.
What am I doing wrong? I want to undo those, but it's
Okay, just hit undo.
Now, as far as Mr. Goldman is concerned, are there banding patterns in his sample? Could you just describe where they are?
he has 2 bands for this probe, and they are here and here.
Now, what about the presence of any bands in any similar location in the boot stain itself?
There really are not any other additional bands in the boot stain that can be clearly seen. So we don't have any additional information about whether he's included or excluded.
Now, as a result of this genetic marker, is Nicole Brown still a possible donor of the DNA found on the boot stain?
Yes.
Is Mr. Goldman excluded now at this point or not?
No.
Why not?
There haven't been, if you look in the boot stain and you look at the few bands that we've seen that are not consistent with Nicole Brown, they are consistent with Mr. Goldman. So, but they're not very many of them. So basically, you're not coming to any strong conclusion thus far.
And would the results, as far as he's concerned, and this stain still remain inconclusive?
Yes.
Okay. Could we then print this? And could you take the arrow, Dr. Cotton, and move it up 5? I believe that would be 257E2, Your Honor.
257E2. All right, that one's captured.
Again, turn your attention to what's been previously marked 257F. Is that the film related to the marker G3 that you described earlier?
Yes, it is.
All right. And again, Dr. Cotton, directing your attention to banding patterns that exist in the boot stain, could you indicate any bands that are present?
With this probe, and based on just looking at the film, there are 3 bands, 2 that are darker, and a single one that is quite light but is right here.
So in other words, you have now shown with 3 different arrows what appear to be 2 bands of, at least in comparison to the bottom arrow, 2 bands of greater intensity and one you've described as lighter than the intensity of the first 2, below those first 2.
That's right.
Now, as far as this particular genetic marker is concerned, what statement, if any, can you make about the possibility that Nicole Brown and or Ron Goldman could have contributed the DNA found on the boot stain at this marker?
Nicole Brown could have been a contributor, and the results with regard to Ronald Goldman are still inconclusive. The single band here that's lighter is consistent with his upper band. There is no lower band that we can see, and this secondary pattern, that is the light bands that we've seen all along, if there were a band down here, we may or may not be able to see it. So essentially, with regard to Ronald Goldman, the results are still inconclusive. With regard to Nicole Simpson, she's Nicole Brown Simpson, she's still included.
Could you place 2 arrows on the appropriate bands for Nicole Brown? And could that be printed and marked, Your Honor, as 257?
So marked.
Incidentally, Dr. Cotton, before we leave this particular film, is there any statement you can make about Mr. Simpson's banding pattern and the boot stain?
He's excluded from as being a donor of the DNA from the boot stain.
Incidentally, you've described the fact that he was excluded as a donor on at least one other earlier genetic marker. Does it make any difference if you're excluded at one genetic marker or all the genetic markers that you look at?
If you were asking a question about paternity, it would. If you're comparing 2 DNA samples and you're asking if they could be from the same person, then you would normally expect to have multiple exclusions unless the people were related. In this case, there are multiple exclusions, so there's no doubt that he's excluded as being a donor to the DNA in item 78.
All right, and lastly, referring to the 5th genetic marker that you described with regard to the Bundy stain and Foyer stains, that is YNH24.
Yes.
Your Honor, referring to People's Exhibit 257G, I'd like to show that to the witness as well.
Yes.
Referring you to this last genetic marker, YNH24, are there any banding patterns on this X-ray film with regard to the boot stain?
Yes.
And could you use the arrows again to describe their location?
There are 2 bands close together, and I'm marking them with the arrows.
With regard to the individuals, that is the 3 individuals, the known samples, can you make any statement, first of all, about Mr. Simpson as being a possible donor of the DNA on the boot stain?
He is excluded.
What about Nicole Brown?
She is included. She has 2 bands also in a similar position to the ones in the boot stain.
And could you use the arrows again to note their location, that is in her sample? And then lastly, what about Mr. Goldman?
There are no additional bands with this probe from the boot stain, so there's no information. That is, he doesn't seem to be there based on this probe alone, and based on the compilation of the data, it doesn't add anything to what we've already seen.
So with respect to Mr. Goldman, after having reviewed the cocktail X-ray as well as the 5 individual genetic marker locations, what statement can you ultimately make about Mr. Goldman and the stain material from the boot?
Based on all of the information together, he cannot be definitively excluded, but he cannot be definitively included either. So the results regarding Mr. Goldman and item 78 are inconclusive.
What about Nicole Brown and the DNA found in that stain from the boot?
Based on all of the films, she is included based on the computer imaging data. The bands that are consistent with Nicole Brown in item 78 do match the bands in the known sample from Nicole Brown.
From the 5 different, and actually, I'm sorry, let me ask that again, but if we could first, and if you would move that arrow up a little higher, and then we'll print this image. Your Honor, may this be marked 257G2?
So marked.
Dr. Cotton, actually, you can resume the witness stand, if you would. As far as Nicole Brown is concerned, I believe you just stated that she, in fact, could be a donor of the stain material from the boot.
Yes.
What's that based on? In other words, how many genetic markers and how many bands?
5 genetic markers and 10 bands.
As far as Mr. Goldman is concerned, how many bands were you able to detect? Now, let me rephrase that. Other than the 10 bands from Nicole Brown, how many additional bands were you able to determine existed in this stain?
Objection is returned from given the willing before regarding mixtures.
Sustained.
Other than the 10 bands, well, let me ask you this question. How many bands total did you detect in this evidence, this boot stain?
Altogether, between the cocktail and the other probes, there are 12. There are 11 in the cocktail, and there is 1 band on MS1 that you can see that does not show up in the cocktail. So that brings it to a total of 12 bands altogether.
And what about when you add in that fifth genetic marker, YNH24? Does that add any more bands to the total number that you detected?
Yes. Okay, we have 11 in the cocktail. We have an additional one in MS1 that you don't see in the cocktail. And then from YNH24, so that's 12. And from YNH24, we have 2 more. So that brings it to a total of 14.
Did Nicole Brown's known sample match 10 of those 14 bands?
Yes,
That left 4 more bands, is that right?
that's right.
That didn't come from her?
That's right.
Could they have come from Ronald Goldman?
They could have.
But your results overall in evaluating the entire results as far as he is concerned are what?
They're inconclusive because we only have 4 bands and he has 9. So we only have a partial bit of information and we don't know what we know that 4 bands is only part of somebody's pattern given the number of probes we've looked at. And we don't know what the other bands in that pattern look like. So we can't say anything further.
In my witness's answer, I moved to strike that portion of the answer because it was speculative, because it was inconclusive.
Overruled.
Incidentally, as far as children are concerned, and let's take, for instance, either the Bundy stain, item 52, or the Foyer stain, item 12. Do you recall your testimony about those 2 items,
Yes,
and in particular the DNA?
yes,
And you described how those items, in fact, match the DNA of Mr. Simpson.
yes.
What about children of an individual? Is children's DNA the same or different from a parent's?
Different.
Why is it different?
Because the child is only going to inherit half of the DNA from each parent. You know, this is a lot easier to do on a diagram than verbally,
Okay.
but
Help you.
you have to,
Excuse me, I thought we went through this once already.
I think we did a little bit, Your Honor. I'd like to go into it in a little more detail.
I don't think so.
All right.
it won't be the same. The child's DNA will not be the same as the parent's DNA. And there actually, I should make an
Actually, doctor, there's no question pending at this point.
Okay.
Proceed.
Can you briefly describe why they're different without the aid of a diagram?
I thought that you get half from each.
I think it bears a little bit of explanation.
I don't think so.
Very
Let's
good.
move on.
Do you have, in terms of your RFLP testing in this case, one further set of autorads?
Yes,
And what do they relate to?
they relate to item 13,
When you say item 13, what are you talking about?
the sock.
With court's permission, I'd like to show just one of the photographs of the sock that's been previously marked. Exhibit 169, Your Honor.
All right.
All right, do you have with you the films from your testing of the sock?
Yes,
And could you hand them to me? And with the court's permission, we will have you describe the same process. First of all, is that the only evidence item on these particular films?
yes,
On these films, do they also include the same known samples from the 3 parties in this case?
yes.
All right, if you could, and I'm going to ask you to step down here. Your Honor, if we could have marked as what I believe would be 258A.
258A. This is going to be the cocktail.
Yes. Dr. Cotton, showing you what will be marked People's Exhibit 258A. Can you just tell us what that is?
This is the cocktail film.
Doctor, you're gonna have to turn around, talk to the jury here.
This is the cocktail film that has the 3 known samples on it and the DNA that was obtained from item 13, which is the sock.
Mr. Clark, thank you. Now, Dr. Cotton, referring you to what's now on the projector screen, you have described that as the cocktail X-ray film for the evidence item number 13, which is the sock.
Yes, I have.
Now, with regard to the various controls, and I believe you've described the controls are the boxed lanes at the very top, are those the same types of controls or the same controls as you've described earlier with regard to the other evidence items?
Yes, they are. Except that there is no K562 cell line DNA on this film. There is the normal TDS DNA on this film.
Why isn't there the K562?
I don't actually know why it wasn't loaded on this film. It may have been just to make sure there was plenty of space between each sample. It doesn't make any difference in the analysis whether it's there or not there.
Why not?
Because we don't have standard sizes for those bands yet, we're not using it officially as a standard. One of the reasons we're putting it on films is so that we can accumulate sizes for that DNA. So our standard that we want to check very closely is the TDS, and that serves the function of having a known human DNA on this gel.
That's the member of your laboratory again, TDS.
Yes,
From looking at this particular X-ray film, does it appear that this test worked properly?
yes, it does.
Did you obtain banding patterns for the sock? That is DNA removed from the sock.
Yes, we did.
All right, could you with the pointer again then indicate the location of those banding patterns in the sock? Now, you have indicated with 8 arrows what appear to be 8 bands, is that correct?
That's right.
It looks like there is 1 band and then a little lower 2 bands fairly close together,
Yes,
and then another band below that,
and that would be this one.
and 1 below that,
Yes,
and then what appear to be 3 bands fairly close together.
yes.
Now, can you examine the banding patterns from Nicole Brown, Ron Goldman, as well as Mr. Simpson? And first of all, can you tell us if any individuals on this particular film are excluded as possible donors of that DNA?
Yes, there are individuals on the film that are excluded.
Okay, let's start with that.
Mr. Simpson's known sample is in this lane and he is excluded. The bands in the sock do not line up with the bands in Mr. Simpson's pattern. There's also one down here.
So Mr. Simpson could not have donated that DNA that was found on the sock.
That's right.
All right, what about the remaining 2 individuals?
Mr. Goldman could not have donated the DNA on the sock. That pattern is clearly different than the pattern on the sock.
So he would be excluded as a donor of the bloodstains found on that sock?
That's right. He would be excluded.
What about Nicole Brown?
Nicole Brown is not excluded. She has 8 bands and they are consistent and in similar positions to the DNA bands that are found on the sock.
And could you use the arrow again to show us the location of her bands on this particular film? Now, if you would just move the pointer on up to the top.
Yes.
As a result of your interpretation of this initial autorad, this film, this cocktail film, what conclusions, if any, could you reach?
The conclusions that you can reach from this film are that Mr. Simpson and Mr. Goldman could not have been the donor of the DNA found on the sock, and Nicole Brown could be the donor of the DNA found on the sock.
As far as the material that you received in the laboratory, and I'm referring to number 13, the sock, what did you actually receive?
We received DNA that had been extracted by the laboratory for the California Department of Justice.
What form did you receive it in?
It was in a liquid form.
So you didn't receive the sock itself.
No, we didn't.
All right. What was the next step in this process of analyzing this particular evidence item?
The next step is the same as the set of films we saw before, and that is to go through with each probe one at a time and identify the bands that are seen individually with each probe.
Would again MS1 be an appropriate place to begin?
Sure.
The single genetic marker?
Sure.
And could this be marked 258B, Your Honor?
258B.
And I'm sorry, I don't believe I asked if we could print the current image, but I know that we may. Told from my ears that that's already being done.
Okay.
And would that image be 258A1?
Correct.
With regard, and before we do that, while this is still on the screen, Dr. Cotton, as far as these 8 bands that are in the sock DNA itself, do they match the 8 bands from Nicole Brown?
Yes, they do.
Now, turning your attention, if I can, to what will be Exhibit 258B, could you examine that particular X-ray? And with the court's permission, I'd like to display that. Dr. Cotton, referring you to 258B, that X-ray film is from your testing at what genetic marker?
MS1.
All right, and did it produce banding patterns for the DNA from the sock?
Yes, it did.
Could you indicate with the arrow the locations of those bands? Now, starting with Mr. Simpson's sample off to the left, could he have been a donor of the DNA found at those 2 bands? I'm sorry, the DNA found that this genetic marker is reflected by those 2 bands you just marked?
No,
or is he excluded?
He's excluded.
What about Ron Goldman?
He is also excluded.
Why is that?
Well, he has 2 bands also, but they are not in the same position as the 2 bands seen in the DNA from the sock.
What about Nicole Brown?
She is not excluded.
Why is that?
Presented by Mr. Darden and Mr. Clark. Mr. Neufeld, is there something you need to take up?
Just to put you on notice, Your Honor, about 30 seconds ago, Mr. Clark furnished me with a 12-page single-space document describing how they calculated the numbers for the mixed stains, which was apparently created yesterday. All I'm asking for is we can either do it now, it'll take me about 20 minutes, or we can do a recess mid-morning for about 20 minutes. I'm going to need to examine this to the extent I have any objections about what they did here as a foundation man. I want to put them on the record, but I'm going to have to review this document, and I obviously can't do it in the next 30 seconds.
Mr. Clark, when do you anticipate getting to the mixed stain calculations?
After the break.
All right.
If there's a mid-morning break.
So all I'm asking you is give me a few extra minutes of that mid-morning break.
Sure, sounds reasonable. All right, let's have the jurors, please.
There's 2 brief items I'd like to bring up. The first is it's my request to use immediately the large light box.
Immediately.
First thing was some
Okay.
fairly brief testimony, and then ask that the jurors be allowed to walk by the light box. I'm going to ask.
Go ahead.
I'm going to ask that be done in 2 segments because there are 3 sets of results, and we can only put 2 up at once. It's going to be my request to show the Rockingham foyer, the boot drop, as well as the Bundy stain, that set of 6 auto-rad across 1 row, and have the witness also use the single cocktail auto-rad with the shoe print 56. Have the jurors walk by, and then do the same thing with actually almost no questioning at all with regard to the 6 auto-rads that relate to the sock.
All right. Any comment, Mr. Neufeld?
Clarification, you want them to do 3 walkthroughs because there are 3 different sets of auto-rads?
2 walkthroughs,
Because there are 2 different sets of auto-rads.
3 different sets of auto-rads.
Okay, but you can't get them all on at once, that's all you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
There's one other item, but I believe it can wait till the next break, and it relates to what the court had asked me to bring up before asking the witness questions about the sock.
Okay.
I have no objection to the walkthrough.
All right, let's get the monster in. I can't think of any other way to do it. Absolutely. In fact, are you going to put this up right now? How do you propose to put them up on the monster?
It was my plan place. I don't know if the court can see, but there are
The reason I ask is timing wise because I think Mr. Simpson's entitled to see how it's displayed to the jury.
It will be the first question I'll actually ask the witness to stand down in front of the light box and to describe a few things about the auto ads that will be placed.
Okay, I get it. They cut the video off at the exact moment that we have been waiting 5 months to hear. But we actually did hear it. We heard right before they cut it off. The last thing she said was that Nicole could not be excluded. So, and then they went to the next. So she said that on the first test, and then they went to the next test. And even though we already knew that OJ's blood, Ron's blood could not be there, he asked those questions again. Is OJ's blood there? Is Ron's blood there? No. And then she said, yes, Nicole had 8 markers in the same spots, 2 bands in the same spots, blah, blah, blah. So we did actually hear what we needed to hear right the second before it was stupidly cut off. So we know for sure that Nicole's blood was found on the socks now.
So it will be the beginning, yes.
All right, are you going to have her place them as part of your presentation?
Yes. Although I could have them placed to begin with. I don't have any problem with that.
All right, why don't we place them first and we'll allow Mr. Simpson to take a look.
Oh, hi guys, I'm back. Hi. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you.
Just to make sure we're not going to overload our circuits here.
Yes.
Okay.
At least it didn't yesterday.
All right.
When the jurors view it, that we actually open up the other juror gate. We're going to move the chair so that they could walk in one direction. I think it might make for an easier
All right, makes sense.
walk by.
How easy is it to actually
Doesn't
turn that
seem
around 180
odd.
degrees?
Because,
Completely 180.
I mean, you think about where you get DNA from. Like, he could have skin cells from his feet in his socks, but they might be dried, dead skin cells, so very, very little DNA in that. His blood was found at the murder scene. That we know for sure. Nicole's blood was found on his socks. That we know for sure right now. Those are 2 facts that we know for sure right now. I don't know. I mean, if he was cut on his hand, you saw the picture. Can't remember which hand it was, the right or left. I can see how her blood got on his socks because as he was stabbing her, she fell to the ground. But for his blood to get onto his socks, his bloody hand would have had to been down near his sock area. So I can understand why the blood from his hand did not get to his socks. I can understand why hers did, because he's stabbing her on the ground where his feet are.
It goes to about an oblique 45.
So, I mean, just turning it on its horizontal axis.
Good question. I think we'd have to try it, see what we could do.
All right, never mind. Put the film up.
That's so true. This is the birth of DNA. we finally get to see the 2 markers and the 8 markers and the blah, 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 blah that they're talking about. Let's see if we can figure it out from here. All right. Down here is, I think, where they're talking about the 2 markers. I'm not sure, but I think.
All right, this is the first set.
I'm going to be quiet
All
and
right,
let her talk.
You want to light them up?
Oh, now we can't see anything. Thank you, sir. Asshole.
All right.
Sorry I called you an asshole. You fixed it. Thank you, sir.
All right, Mr. Neufeld, Mr. Simpson, do you want to take a look? Let's just have, excuse me, counsel. Let's have Mr. Neufeld, Mr. Simpson, Mr. Cochran.
Hey, Dearden, when Simpson walks by you, look at how big his freaking hands are real quick, will ya? Before you do something stupid later. You can look without touching, sir. You don't need your hands that close. Nope, he has to touch. He has to touch it. He's probably got a Sharpie in his sleeve.
Now the second set.
I think we can do that at the next break. Let's keep these up and let's get rolling with the jury.
Now, because once we're done, and this isn't going to take long, I was going to have blocks go out of the courtroom, so we don't have to deal with it.
Set them up.
How much longer, Josh? When do you leave? It's already 8:13 where I am. That's why. I know it's not where you are. I don't know how far behind you are. Is it 5:15 in the morning where you are right now? OJ, don't stab Dr. Cotton, please. Ooh, that's early. Early, early. I already put in an hour of work by 6:13 a.m. Oh, okay. Screenshots or it didn't happen. I thought we were getting the jury. Why isn't the jury here?
A third time on here.
My bad. My bad. I shouldn't have fast forwarded it.
Apparently, they're able to get all the X-ray films up there at one time, and since the jury has already seen these X-ray films displayed through the Elmo, they've also had Dr. Cotton hold them up. That's twice. They're now going to see them a third time on here. I don't know why we have to have 2 walkthroughs. It seems like at a certain point, it's not only repetitive, it's cumulative. That's the only thing I would comment on.
Mr. Clark?
They don't all fit. There's actually 3 sets. One of the sets has a single one. So they'd have to be smashed in where they all can't be seen.
The single one is simply item 56, which is blank, which they all have a copy of already.
All right. I think there's some benefit, though, to seeing them displayed side by side.
Of course you do. Of course you do. God forbid we stop something being duplicated or cumulative.
Objection will be overruled. All right, let's have the jurors, please.
Overruled. Monica, are you here?
The jury door accessible there.
What 9? What 9?
Gentlemen, please be seated. All right, let the record reflect that we've been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All right, Dr. Cotton, would you please rise? Mr. Clark, where do you anticipate questioning Dr. Cotton at this point?
I do at the rather large light box that we have in the courtroom.
All right. All right, good morning, Dr. Cotton. You're reminded you are still under oath. Mr. Clark, you may continue.
Thank you.
And hopefully conclude.
Yes.
Thank you.
Dr. Cotton, prior to the jury coming in, have you had an opportunity to put various of these x-ray films on this rather large light box that we have in the courtroom?
Yes.
And can you describe for us first which of the films are across the top row of the light box? And there appear to be 6 of them.
Excuse me, Mr. Clark, come to the council pass so that they can be in a vantage point.
That was both more fun
All right, Dr.
and rough. Being
The,
demonetized.
6 films across the top are the films that have items 52, 78, and 12, along with the 3 known samples and the rest of the controls. The film that had all the dots all over it with the background isn't up here since we weren't really able to make any interpretation from it. And the first film is the cocktail of 4 probes. The 4 films following the cocktail are each the individual films or the individual probes that are part of that cocktail. And the very last film is the probe that is not part of the cocktail.
Let me stop you for a moment. The top row, does it then have the films that you actually showed on the overhead projector yesterday with regard to the Bundy stain,
Yes.
the Rockingham Foyer stain,
Yes.
and the boot stain?
Yes, with the exception of the one that has background on it.
Now, on the lower row, there appears to be one more film. What is it?
That's the film that was also passed out to the jury that has item 56 and the 3 known individuals.
All right. Then with the court's permission, I'm going to light the light box and then ask the jurors further questions. I'm sorry, ask the witness further questions.
All right. Proceed.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Cotton, now that you have an opportunity to have all of these x-ray films on the light box at one time, would the fact that they're all together be helpful in explaining anything that yesterday you weren't able to explain as well because these films were not done all at one time or shown at one time?
There are 2 things that are useful in terms of putting them up on the light box. One is to just illustrate to you how they can be superimposed one on the other to identify the bands in the cocktail. And then also, this is a much more optimal way to view them, not from quite that far away, but in terms of seeing bands that are not very dark.
All right. With respect to the upper row then, can you point out for us what you're talking about and which of these films show, for instance, this lightness and darkness and so forth, that it would be helpful to see while they're up all at one time?
The only
That's
pattern
it.
that we need to pay attention to.
When I was demonetized, though, I didn't have to follow any rules that YouTube had because I knew I was going to delete everything I had before I appealed. So we were free. I could play whatever I wanted. I could say whatever I wanted. And what sucks is I lost a really lot of good content from when I deleted all that stuff. But I got monetized again, so it was worth it. But man, that was not the worst times. That was pretty fun. Easy, laid back, relaxed.
In terms of
We
where
laughed
have
a
light
lot.
bands is the item 52 pattern. And the bands are most clearly visible on the cocktail, but individually, one can go through and pick out bands in that. The other bands in the samples are pretty much easy to see, perhaps with 1 or 2 exceptions on item 78. So MS1 has a single band. It's up here where my finger is pointing for item 52. For MS31, the bands are quite easy to see. For MS43, again, they're very light, and 2 of them. For G3, they look fairly clear, but still light. And for YNH24, they are clear, but still light. So that is what you would be looking at if you were in the laboratory. You would be viewing it on a light box like this on your desk or on the counter or something.
And again, when you're referring to 52, you're referring to the stain from the Bundy walkway?
That's right.
Now, there's one more auto radiograph x-ray that's down below, and I believe you said that's the particular film that was used in an attempt to type the shoe print number 56,
That's right.
and that yielded or produced no results, correct?
That's right.
Does that give you then the opportunity to show what a lane looks like that has no DNA in it versus lanes that have more DNA and then lanes with more DNA still when you compare all 7 of these films?
Well, when you say it has no DNA in it, that's not literally correct. There was some DNA loaded, it just wasn't human. So there's no human DNA there. And it just is an example of a lane that has absolutely no bands in it at all.
All right. While these 7 films are present on the light box, is there anything further that you feel would be appropriate to point out in this comparison process?
Just in terms of understanding how these films relate to one another, let me pull one down and give an illustration, which won't be enormously easy to see, but hopefully you'll get the idea. Let's use, as an example, because it's fairly easy to see, let's look at item number 12. If we wanted to identify in item number 12 which of the bands here was produced by which probe, one can, and here's the band I'm going to follow for MS1. Because these all came from the same membrane, they are superimposable. You can lay these one on top of the other, and I'm just now moved the top one slightly to the right, and I can see that the top band for item number 12 is the band that is produced by MS1, and they can be superimposed well enough so that now you can't really see that you have 2 films then.
Now, just for the record, Dr. Cotton, have you just taken the film that's labeled Exhibit 257B and placed it over the film labeled 257A?
Yes. And then you would go on and continue that process, and I won't go through all 6 films. If you go on to the next film, MS31, you can do exactly the same thing. And I can determine from that the 2 bands that are in the middle here, the bottom 2 of this group of 3, are the bands in the cocktail that are produced by MS31. So once all the films have been completed, that's the procedure that you can use in the laboratory to go through and say, well, if I'm going to take my sizes from this film, which is the easiest thing to do, then I can identify which probes each of those bands comes from by simply superimposing them, by making that identification, and then noting that in your case materials.
All right, Dr. Cotton, while we have these films on the board, I'd like you to assume, and let's start with number 56, the shoe print from the Bundy scene. I'd like you to assume that with regard to that particular blood stain, that was from a blood stain, and that was found on a walkway outside in an area that has leaves and apparent soil nearby.
Objection.
And that item was collected during a late morning time period on a given day. I'd then like to shift your attention to item number 52 from the Bundy walkway. And that would be referring you to the films that are Exhibit 257, A, B, C, and so forth. And I'd like you to assume that that was found on a concrete type driveway in an apparent cleaner area than item 56, but collected at approximately the same time that day, same day. And then lastly, I'd like you to assume with regard to item number 12, that in fact was blood staining from an indoor area that is inside a home on a floor, and that was collected later the same day in the late afternoon approximately. With those assumptions, do these results that you've obtained, are they consistent with degradation of DNA in relative amounts?
With the assumptions that you've just given me, the state of the DNA, the amount of degradation that we see in these 3 samples that you mentioned is consistent with the types of environment that you've just described.
Why? Can you explain that?
There have been a number of experiments published and also based on our own experience and talking with other people from other DNA laboratories. We know that if a sample is exposed to soil or leaves, the likelihood of getting DNA from that sample that is good enough to use for RFLP is very low.
All right. How does the comparison of these 3 items, how does that play a role in your conclusion?
If item 56 was in an area where there were leaves or dirt or
Okay.
soil, the fact that we did not get any human DNA.
Now we know how the defense is going to try to attack. Right there.
But we did get DNA that was possibly bacterial DNA is consistent with the assumption that you asked me to make.
All right. What about then the relative conditions of the DNA with regard then to the Bundy stain 52 and the Rockingham Foyer stain number 12?
the Bundy stain 52 has less DNA and DNA which is more degraded than the DNA in item number 12. And if item number 12 was collected from a cleaner location than item number 52, that would be consistent with the condition of the DNA as it's seen on the autorads and as it was seen on the small gel that was done after the DNA extraction.
Incidentally, when, for instance, a human cuts himself or herself and begins to bleed, does one's blood, as it's coming from one's body, have bacteria in it?
Not unless one is very ill.
So the bacteria comes from where then?
The bacteria in the blood would be then coming from whatever the blood was deposited on.
All right, at this time, Your Honor, it would be my request that the jurors have an opportunity to walk by and examine these particular films while they're on the light box.
All right, let's have the jurors in row number 1 then, starting with juror number 1. You could file by the light box and then re-enter the jury box on the at the other jury door, please. And take your time.
Seven, I believe, A through
The complete series of 257.
complete series except for 257C, as well as Exhibit 246. And I'm going to ask you if you would now place on the board the films that constitute 258A through F regarding the sock. Now, Dr. Cotton, with regard to People's Exhibit 258, those 6 films, first of all, with regard to the sock, are there any faint or weak bands that you need to point out?
No, there aren't.
Your Honor, again, with permission of the court, may the jury view this set of radiographs.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Cotton, in the course of your testing, you described earlier the fact that you tested a number of samples that you received using the PCR process.
That's right.
How did you decide whether, well, let me rephrase that. How did you decide whether to type a sample using PCR or RFLP or both?
If the DNA was in sufficiently good condition for both, we did both. If it wasn't in sufficiently good condition to do RFLP, we then did PCR.
With regard to the samples that you identified on those boards that had a number of different photographs of envelopes and so forth, did you in fact test those samples either by RFLP or PCR or both?
Yes.
And did you obtain results from a number of those samples?
Yes, we did.
Your Honor, at this time I'd ask to be marked as people's next in order, what I believe could be described as the Bundy results board.
All right. 259.
And I'm going to also ask the court's permission to be able to place in the location under the projector screen with a second tripod the earlier board, Exhibit 165, that is the photo board for the Bundy crime scene.
Refresh my recollection as to 165. Do we have victims depicted?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Where's Mr. Neufeld? I was just making sure you were positioning yourself so you could see these.
Has copies of these boards. They were given
Right.
with the material shown on.
Just on arrangements.
On the arrangements?
In other words, with the new configuration of the courtroom, I have a suggestion about the boards. Oh, I see, it's that one.
And we may have to move it back to give Dr. Cotton some ingress egress there. All right, let's proceed. All right, Mr. Clark, the difficulty is the height of the Bundy board. 165.
All right, and perhaps as I refer to individual items, we can raise it or point out as necessary. All right, Dr. Cotton, with respect to various items of evidence, and if I may, I will direct you to specific item numbers and a brief description of them. Do you have before you the results that your laboratory obtained, whether it's PCR results or RFLP results?
Yes, I do.
All right. Initially, were you asked and did you test an item number 47 described as first drop by the victims at Bundy?
Yes, we did.
What type of testing did you use with respect to that item?
PCR testing.
At how many markers? And we'll try to do this as to this first marker and perhaps shorten it with the remaining markers.
6.
And would one of those markers be DQ alpha
Yes,
and the other 5 markers be what?
they are the 5 markers that compile the polymarker.
And did you obtain results from that testing?
Yes, we did.
All right. With respect to those results, can you describe what the DQ alpha result was?
The DQ alpha result was a 1.1, 1.2.
Now, I'm going to ask you, and perhaps, have you had a chance to look at these results boards before, Dr. Cotton?
Yes, I have.
And have you had an opportunity to look at not only the various items of evidence that are listed on the board, but also the known types of the 3 people in this case, Mr. Simpson, Nicole Brown, and Ronald Goldman, that are listed at the very top of the diagram?
Yes, I have.
With regard to the known types, that is the DQ alpha types, are the types shown on this board, People's Exhibit 259, with respect to those 3 known persons, accurate?
Yes, they were.
Now, with regard to, again, item number 47, this first drop by the victims at Bundy, did you also obtain polymarker results at those 5 additional markers?
Yes, we did.
As a result of those,
Josh is naked, so we lost sound. I can still hear the static. Wait, I think it's there. It's back. I don't know what
can't see it.
happened.
okay. With regard to what's beneath that cover that I just removed, and this is item number 47, your laboratory, it states DQ alpha 1.1, comma 1.2.
I know why the sound went off, because it's time to stop now, guys. Yay. Woo, we're in May 11th. We started at May 10th today. Now we're at May 11th today. Let's go. Thank you so much for coming out, guys. I appreciate it. I'll see you all again real soon. Bye.